Okay. Let the fun begin. Where is he? We have a quorum. So. Okay. This is the Planning Commission meeting of March 26th. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. Let's call a meeting to order. A roll call vote. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barron, Commissioner Woodson, Chair St. John,
Here.
Commissioner Chang,
Yeah.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Here.
Commissioner Woodson, Simmons.
Here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Guido. Let's all welcome Michael Simmons, is the newest member of the Planning Commission. Welcome, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, we'll have a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Volunteer. Next is item 4, any special announcements and communications from the floor.
This time.
Okay. Number 5, ex parte communications for quasi judicial matters from the commission members. Good. Okay, number 6 is the consent agenda. First item A is the approval of the minutes from Planning Commission meeting of February 12th, 2026.
Chair St. John, for item number 4, we do have a guest. Are you wanting to speak on any of the items tonight or anything not on the agenda? Huh? Well, the chair has to recognize you. So I think you should have asked if there were items not on the agenda that people wanted to speak about.
Oh, okay.
So
Yes. Yes. So turn on the microphone and state your name.
Yes, how are you? Yes, good evening, council member. My name is Wael Ezer and my wife is Dina Gadalla. I am the owner of 3160 Mimi Court, Marina. I am requesting approval for 1,000 square foot detached EDU located in my backyard. The project has been designed to comply with all applicable city requirements, including zoning, setback, and building codes. The detached design maintaining privacy and neighborhood character, and it will not create any negative impact related to the parking, traffic, or noise. This project will help provide additional housing in our community. I respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Guido, this is the first time this has come before the commission. So let me ask a question. Have you applied to the city, the planning department? Did you apply for permits from
Yes, I
the?
did, but they said I'm in a coastal zone, so to do that here.
so there must have been some confusion. So for your item, we're going to be scheduling you for a meeting in April. They're only allowed to vote on items that we put on an agenda and that we legally have to post the agenda, write a report. So your item's actually going to be going on April 23rd. So today's not, they're not allowed to discuss. But you were a guest, so I thought you were here. So that's why I wanted to. Yeah. So Phil will be in contact with you. you'll get a staff report that the staff will prepare, and then you'll present it to this body on April 23rd. So you're free to stay, or you can go enjoy the rest of your evening. So
So what I would say is that so two things. Number one, thank you for coming and being proactive about it. It really is a simple process. I mean, part of it, I mean, we'll get into more details once you get through the application. But when you come back, basically the same thing's going to happen is when we get to the agenda item on it, we'll go to an agenda, the staff report, just so you kind of know what happens that day. The staff will present their findings to us. Then we'll kind of look over it. We may have some questions for staff, or we may have some questions for you, give you a chance to speak about what you're doing, just what you just did. And then we turn around and we discuss it and then we take a vote on it. And so that's actually what the process will happen 1 month from today. So this was just prep work.
This has happened before, or in, similar type of requests. And it's something that we know how to handle. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Guido.
sorry, Chair Woodson. Chair St. John.
It's okay. We're still friends.
You never got anybody.
Okay, let's see, we were back to approval of the minutes of the prior meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review? And are there any comments or corrections to the prior minutes? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. A vote?
Commissioner Barron, Vice Chair Woodson, Chair St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons.
I'll abstain.
Thank you.
Pretty sure we have. The motion passes.
Yes, motion pass.
Okay. Item 7 on our agenda, public hearings. Tonight we have one public hearing, religious and institutional housing overlay. And we'll have a staff report.
We're fortunate enough to get some REAP 2.0 grant money for this. So Bryce from Rincon has been leading this charge. So I'll be passing off the presentation to him.
Okay.
Thank you, Guido. Just bringing up my presentation now. Can folks see the screen? All right. Okay. So good evening, Chair Woodson and Commissioners. My name is Bryce Haney. I'm a planner with Rincon Consultants. Tonight, I'm going to be walking through the Religious and Institutional Housing Overlay, or RIHO, which has been prepared as part of the city's broader housing element implementation efforts. So I'll start with just a brief overview of the broader project and then spend most of the time focusing on the overlay itself, what it does, how it works, and how it relates to state law and CEQA. So this work is funded by REAP 2.0 grant funding, as Guido had said, and that's focused on implementing 2 housing element programs. So the first program is Program 1.4, which is centered on facilitating affordable housing on faith-based and institutional properties through the creation of a new zoning overlay. And the second program is Program 2.3, which I presented back here in January, and that involved developing an economical housing toolkit. So these 2 programs are an important part of the city's eligibility for the state's pro-housing designation, which gives cities an edge when applying for larger state grants for housing-focused community benefit projects, infrastructure projects, and public transit improvements. So that's a general overview, and now we can get into some of the details of the overlay. So at the state level, recent legislation, primarily Senate Bill 4 and Assembly Bill 1851, has created new opportunities for housing development on properties owned by religious and educational institutions. So SB 4 allows the development of affordable housing on qualifying properties owned by these institutions. And that's as long as the project meets the somewhat stringent requirements of that law. And then AB 1851, there's some nuance here, but it essentially prevents jurisdictions from blocking housing projects on these sites based on the parking requirements that a city may have for religious institutions. So in developing this overlay to address these, we looked at the best practices from other jurisdictions and paired that with outreach to local institutions and affordable housing developers. In terms of outreach, we conducted mailers and email notifications to religious institutions across the city and had conversations with affordable housing developers, and also spoke directly with representatives of the Chua Udam Temple. And we heard from the development community that there's a few themes that came through pretty clearly. There's interest in identifying sites at higher allowable densities, but also allowing lower densities to maintain some flexibility so that projects can scale down if needed for financial feasibility. And there was also interest in exploring a programmatic CEQA approach to pre-clear a set of properties under CEQA. And then, of course, not surprisingly, funding constraints came up as a consistent theme for these developers working on these types of projects. So from religious institutions, there was less interest in large-scale development partnerships with affordable housing developers, but there was interest in smaller-scale housing, particularly for staff or for members of their congregation. So that feedback really shaped how the overlay was structured. So what is the RIHO? So the RIHO is an overlay zone that applies to specific list of properties. So these are religious institutions, educational institutions, and other quasi-public or community-serving sites. It doesn't change the underlying zoning. Instead, it creates an additional optional pathway for development. And the idea with that is to add flexibility without disrupting the existing zoning framework. I will note that SB 4 does streamline housing in local jurisdictions without a dedicated overlay to implement it. But this overlay that we created for the city of Marina also allows the city to create a pathway for additional residential development above and beyond what is allowed by the state law. And this approach ensures that the city is consistent with both their commitments in their housing element, and it maintains the city's pro-housing status and access to future grant funding. So the overlay includes two primary development pathways. The first is for fully deed-restricted affordable housing projects. Those can be developed on any site in the overlay and include some flexibility on how income levels are distributed. For example, it allows a small percentage of employee or manager units along with moderate and lower income units as well. So as part of the overlay, if a project meets all the requirements under SB 4, it can be processed ministerially. And then if it doesn't meet the requirements of SB 4, it can still move forward under the overlay, but it would go through a discretionary review and include a project level CEQA analysis. So then the second pathway is geared towards smaller scale projects on sites with underlying zoning of R1. And these are subject to the city's inclusionary requirements and would also require discretionary approval. For development standards for these fully deed restriction projects, densities are increased beyond what's allowed under the current base zoning. Projects that qualify for ministerial approval under SB 4 can develop up to 20 units per acre in residential zones and 40 units per acre in commercial zones. And then with the discretionary approval process, those densities go up to 40 units an acre and 50 units an acre, respectively. So setbacks stay consistent with the underlying zoning, and then building height can increase by one additional story over what's allowed by that underlying zone. Parking is reduced from 1 space per unit, and and if the site is within a half-mile of a major transit stop, no parking is required, and that's consistent with state law. As with other residential projects, the city's objective design standards would apply just like any other multifamily residential project. For property zones, for properties with the underlying zoning of R1, a property owner can choose to pursue a larger scale SB4 style project like we had discussed, or comply with this separate set of development standards for these smaller scale projects that are kind of more in line with existing neighborhood conditions. So for those smaller scale projects, densities are capped at 18 units an acre, and then height is limited to 30 feet, which is consistent with the R1 zone. And there's also a unit size limitation to help ensure that housing units are more affordable by design. Parking is still 1 space per unit, and objective design standards apply here as well. So the reason for these more stringent, lower density development standards is to make sure that we're not incentivizing these projects too much on sites where a more deeply affordable project could be developed. And overall, this pathway is intended to make smaller projects feasible on sites where a larger project may be economically infeasible. So we just wanted to open up that pathway for a smaller project, but not limit the likelihood that someone would be interested in pursuing a larger project. So in terms of how this relates to SB4, the overlay is designed to work alongside state law. So projects, again, that qualify under SB4 are processed ministerially and they're exempt from CEQA. And then projects that go above and beyond what's allowed by SB4, the overlay creates a local pathway that allows them to move forward through that discretionary review process with the required additional environmental analysis. So why do we take that approach? First, it allows the city to satisfy the requirements of the pro-housing designation in the really short term, while intentionally creating a pathway to do more to streamline housing development over time. So this approach allows city staff to see how the standards perform in practice and then refine based on actual projects, not just the assumptions that we've made so far. Because implementing some of these more aggressive standards with a ministerial approval process really does require more community input and a more intensive CEQA analysis than we were able to do in this with this project. And then lastly, timing is a really important factor. So as the city is coming on completing its general plan update, there's going to be an additional zoning code update that will be needed to maintain consistency between the zoning code and the new general plan. And the city may want to consider a more comprehensive approach and apply those more aggressive standards at that time to align with the broader zoning code update. So from a CEQA perspective, the key point is just that the overlay itself does not approve any specific development. Again, projects that are not allowed ministerially under state law would still require a project level CEQA review. And then adoption of the overlay ordinance is not considered a project under CEQA, and it's consistent with the common sense exemption. So with that, staff is recommending these two actions shown on the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions and support the commission's discussion.
Okay, thank you. We next should open this to public comment. Is there anyone on Zoom?
Chair St. John, no one has raised their hand on this particular item.
Okay. And why don't we move on to the commissioners' time for comments and questions. What do we have here? Yeah, I can start it. Who do I have? I have several lights on, so we'll start at the. So who's, that's you? Okay. Right? 1, 2, 3. I've got it. Okay, Chair recognizes Vice Chair Woodson.
Okay, I have a couple questions. I'm not sure which it goes to, but I'll just throw them out there. The first is on affordability to staff and congregates as a requirement. So the concept was that in the survey, it came back, hey, we're not looking at high density. We would like kind of low density that would primarily support staff and congregates. So my question is, I thought under this, my understanding under these requirements in SB4 is that this has to meet low income thresholds. I guess that would be my first question, because if so, especially on the staff, I could kind of understand, probably not much staff, if many are independently wealthy and would exceed that requirement. But I do have a question about congregants, if they want to prioritize congregants. And there's a second question with that. So my first one is if that's what they want, then how would we ensure compliance with congregants if they wanted to do that? That then leads to I'll just throw them out because they all kind of build on each other. Leads to my second question on congregants is.
I'm not clear what you're saying, Vice Chair, in terms of congregates. Can you
My
elaborate?
understanding was that under the affordability requirements, that it had to be low income to qualify for this. How would we guarantee that a congregant of the church who could be making $1 million a year is qualified to live in one of these houses underneath this requirement?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who applies for the BMR unit, we would have to do the normal income verification for them. So there's no guarantee that they would qualify.
So
Yeah.
what we're basically saying is that this is going to create an internal administrative load for us to verify for anything underneath this, any religious institution on this overlay that applies. We'll have to add that to a list of things that we are verifying as part of the city, just like we do for Preston Park and other places.
Yeah, I mean, that's the case for the affordable housing overlay that this commission adopted 3 years ago. Anybody has to go through the normal BMR verification process.
So, okay, that's fine. Ask them. So this, because other people will ask that too. The second one is, in that light, when it comes to prioritization, if they're meeting our SB4, if they're meeting our requirements and we're meeting the state requirements, can they actually restrict the if they open it up to outside of staff, can they actually restrict it to only members of or congregants of their religious institution, or do they have to open it up to the entire public who would qualify?
Bryce, do you want to take that? Because I know you've done a little bit more research on this.
Sure, yeah, I can take that. So if the housing project was funded with a particular type of tax incentive program like the LIHTC program, or the rules and regulations for who is allowed, or like the rules and regulations for who can have access to those housing units that were built with public funding or public tax incentive funding or other types of funding mechanisms, will usually have requirements that the property cannot restrict who is renting or living in the units, just based on fair housing laws. But if a project is built with just 100% private funding, I think it's more likely that they would be able to prioritize congregants and staff.
Totally makes sense. I just wanted to verify that so it comes down to likely funding source,
right,
of how it gets funded and then how it would meet. I just want to make sure we're clarified on that. And then the last question I have is, if we go under section D and D4 and look at the ministerial review, which again, I understand the concept of it. If we are if it's building a single family under R1, then I can kind of understand maybe some of the local communities or an ADU type may not disagree with this. But if we start using it as infill for multifamily type homes or townhouses, then at that point, if it qualifies for ministerial review and the public gets involved with this, what becomes the process for how is the city going to address that? Because we address that, period. Question mark. Question mark.
Are you at, so how would the city address ministerial review for?
So some of these properties, some of the overlay, some of the institutions have large properties. They have 3/4 of an acre of land potentially that they could build on. That's one thing. Other properties have almost no land that they could build on, but they could turn around and put 2 properties on that generally, if we were looking at it, we may not approve normally. And then the local community gets involved. They can look at this and they say, well, wait a minute, they are going to build 2 or 4 houses onto this property. We were fine with it being a church. We don't want people actually living there full time. And so if we go through that ministerial review, what becomes the avenue that the public can engage on this? Or is the public just kind of out there by themselves hanging in the wind and can't engage?
Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did write into the ordinance that a community meeting is highly encouraged, right?
Yes, I did say in the ordinance that the community meeting is encouraged. I think the main thing to remember with this ministerial review process that was created under SB4 is basically addressing this exact situation. So the state has said that through the implementation of SB4 that the community does not, have much of a say in a project that meets all of the other requirements of SB4. Those requirements are pretty stringent in order to address some of community's general concerns as far as proximity to industrial uses or other types of things in that aspect. But under SB4, the community has less of a say than a typical discretionary review process.
So I get that, and I think maybe my comment on that becomes, I'm not sure where this fits in, and maybe I just missed it when I was reading it. Then within the policy, then I think explaining the intent a little bit clearer, that I'm not sure the best way to do it and be polite, but at the same time, it's just saying, look, this is about exactly what you just said. We're creating this because there has been a restriction. Local communities have basically thrown up a wall around these institutions, but we know that this is a great spot. And so how can we politely say that intention of why this exists and why we support this and why the ministerial review is logical for this and why the community engagement is minimized as a result of that. I don't know if we really do a good job of explaining that in the underlying intent behind the scenes, which I think would be good for the public to understand. I'll just close it at that.
Okay, thank you. Sure, Woodson. Paul, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. The first question I had is the mirror to religions organizations. Could you tell me how many mailers you have sent and any response?
Bryce, I think this is directed to you.
Guido, we worked on the mailer together.
We did. So I received 3 inquiries, one from Calvary Baptist, what was the Vietnamese parish, Bryce, that you referenced?
Chua Udon Temple.
Yeah, and then there was one other that I can't recall off the top of my head. So
Because that's going to, I do really support this direction of this ordinance, and it's just that I have some considerations, several considerations. Number one is the infrastructures. And because this ordinance assumes no significant environmental impact under CEQA, correct? And because you did mention in your slide, it's not required. So I think we should be mindful of this cumulative effect, particularly on traffic, parking, water, sewer system, school, and community park. Because if you utilize I understand today you could tell a lot of churches have less than 10 Bs and more parking space. I think it's a good thing to utilize the parking space for community. I totally agree with that. But by doing so, but also we have to understand how about the support on the infrastructures. I mean, are able to accommodate all these houses that we are building. And on the implementation, the vision is good, but always on the implementation, we just have to exercise our care and make sure that we have enough infrastructure to support it. And secondly, many of the identified sites are located within or adjacent established neighborhood. So if we do have affordable housing they're building up, and also we have to consider, is it compatible with the neighbors? And that's something we have to take that into consideration. And again, this is not to change the ordinance, but is to just say when we implement it, we just have to consider all this. And the other thing is the financial challenges and what role the city can play in supporting partnership, funding opportunity, or incentive to ensure this is successful. I'm not sure about the role that city can play in this, but I think we have to think about it. And also, we need to go through the check and balance on individual project because the housing are for all income levels and while maintaining a high quality of life. So again, for all income level, I don't know how do we define affordable housing and what kind of income and how much are we considering? I think we have to set a guideline on that. If you do have, I think that's good. So what I'm saying is I do support it. I think this ordinance, but it's just that thinking that the implementations, we just need to exercise the cares and make sure that everything is done right. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure how to respond to your concerns. Unless it was one by one for each one.
I just bring it up is in case, I mean,
Okay.
we don't have any application right now, correct? On any churches apply or any developers have applied?
No one has applied because the ordinance hasn't been adopted yet. So if we can get a favorable recommendation, we'll go to council next month and then potentially we might see a few people apply in the next couple of years. So, but to answer your overall question, sewer, water, park impacts, that'll all be assessed when a project is filed. This is really just the ordinance. Anytime you do a major upgrade of a property, the water district, sewer district will require upgrades of the utilities. So, yeah. So that will be assessed as part of any other just general project. That's just a standard practice for the community development department. So,
Yeah, the other thing we need to consider is the compatibility and make sure that the project is compatible with the neighbors for building.
I'm not sure that that's,
Because-
we have to be in compliance with the SB4 and AB, 1851.
Yeah.
Those two state laws, and unless they introduce in those state laws compatibility, this touchy-feely kind of thing, the state is forcing us to get away from that. They say we must have design standards that are, what's it called, Guido?
That's correct, Chair, St. John. With the adoption of objective standards and over 105 housing bills, the blending in with the neighborhood type language, that's no longer permitted when we review housing projects. But that's also the reason why this commission and the council spent 18 months adopting objective zoning standards. They're very strict standards to make sure the housing is built that's consistent with Marina values and neighborhoods. If you meet those standards, you now get a permit from us because that's how state law has changed. But to answer your other questions, absolutely, we still have the authority to ask for upgrades to all the sewer, water, utilities, and other type stuff. So,
Thank you.
Delia.
Thank you. I have a couple of kind of questions and concerns or comments. As far as I understand, Marina, most of the churches with some acreage around them are in Old Marina, where we already have kind of different types of densities. The new developments are already built in a way that there are no churches with unused or big parking lots, which means that most of these affordable housing is going to concentrate in Old Marina. I do have concern with environmental justice issues, that Old Marina will become even more dense compared to New Marina, where you have those big homes with so much more parking and yards and so forth, and no churches that you can crowd smaller units for low income families. I already know that in Sea Haven, there are several apartment buildings for affordable homes that people in the next big units, the single homes, don't really want to buy them. Or it takes longer to sell those single homes that are right next to apartment buildings for affordable homes. So this kind of issues can rise in Old Marina, where neighborhoods will see themselves becoming more dense because those churches are only, as far as I understand, Marina, in the old parts of town. That's one comment I want to make. If anybody has any response to this, I appreciate it. My other question is the size of the units. One of the pages shows that 2-bedroom apartments is up to 1,400 square feet. I consider this pretty big 200-bedroom apartments. If this is affordable homes that we are trying to put a lot of them, this is pretty big unit for a 2-bedroom. So who decided on these type of sizes? Just a question. Another question, is there any study about interest in this kind of housing in the churches here, in those houses of faith in Marina, about who is interested in doing this? What are we looking at? Numbers of units? I see 18 units. I live right next to a parking lot of a church, and I'm thinking they're going to put 40 units there. 18 units, definitely I don't see parking, how that's going to happen. And also they can be higher, those units, those apartment buildings can be higher than the surrounding homes. That is going to cause a lot of conflict with the neighborhood. So some of these issues, I think, need to be addressed before we really say, yeah, let's go for it, because we'll find ourselves in very high density areas, building even more apartment buildings or small units, offering bigger units than some apartments in Marina already are, higher and more crowded. So these are some of my concerns, and if anybody has answers for them, I might be coming with some other concerns that I might have. Thank you very much.
Bryce, do you want to provide some background about your research, building out the ordinance and your work up and down the state on this kind of work?
Sure. So as Guido had said earlier, there's been relatively little interest, active interest with religious institutions in Marina as of now, interested in these kinds of projects. But we do see these kinds of projects that are, further enabled by SB4 happening in the city of Salinas. And I was speaking with an affordable housing developer who's working on some projects in Santa Cruz, also with a religious institution property. So these projects are happening, but I think it's just a little bit of a slower development cycle down in Marina. So so that's just kind of a first note there. As far as the maximum unit size limitation, I agree. It's a 1,400 square feet for a 2-bedroom is quite large. The main thinking with that was just to make sure that we weren't allowing a very large unit. So if there's a 3-bedroom house and it's 2,600 square feet, that's not the type of development we're looking to enable with this ordinance. But yeah, I think we included that 800, 1,400, and 2,000 square foot maximum just as something to react to, and I think we can take that feedback and adjust those maximums. As far as conflicts with the neighborhood goes, I mean, so the type of development enabled by SB4 is something that the state has wanted to push, just as a recognizing the opportunity to put additional housing units on some of those lesser used church parking lots, for example. And I think as I said earlier, the intention of the law is to reduce the amount of say that the community has in this type of development. That's not the intention of this particular ordinance, because we do have a pathway that there's the first pathway that just implements SB4 and just follows state law. And then there's the second pathway that says, okay, as soon as a development project comes in that wants to go above and beyond state law, or wants to do a similar type project on maybe a site that doesn't quite qualify for state streamlining, then the project would go through that traditional discretionary process, which would allow additional community feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Commissioner Barron, I have one comment or one clarification. You mentioned apartments in Sea Haven, new apartments, and I live in Sea Haven and I'm on the board of directors for the HOA. And to my knowledge, there are no apartments. There is some condominium style.
Yeah, it's just a manner of speech that I use the word apartment.
Okay, those are not apartments.
I mean,
They are
multi-unit.
not-
I
pardon?
mean, like a building that has more than one unit.
Right,
You can call
I
it
can-
apartment, condo, multi-unit,
Yeah.
whichever. I just use the word in general.
okay, those are, they're, each of those, I think there is a total of 17 units in Sea Haven, which maybe 40% are built. And they are two structures in each one, 2 structures of 3 units. So for each site, each plot, there's 6 units, and they would be 2 3-unit condominiums. And they are 2 and 3 bedroom. Yeah, they are low income uh, compared to the single family homes. They're high density, but they are not obnoxiously high, 3 units for one building.
What I
Very
say
few
is that from
apartments are
conversation
3
with people
units.
who live in Sea Haven, my understanding was that there are a few places where the multi-unit buildings and the next single homes that are right next to these units are harder to sell. It's just my impression from what people who live in Sea Haven tell me. I'm not saying anything from my own knowledge, but I speak to people and that's what I hear.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
just want people to know here at the commission that I heard that.
but I've heard doesn't comply with what you've heard. They were quite actively pursued. There's a long list of applicants because they are extremely undervalued compared to the single family homes.
I believe she's talking about the single family homes that are adjacent
Oh,
to those.
the single family.
And she's talking that
Lower the value of the single family homes adjacent to these units.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's lowered the value as much as it has slowed the sale price or the sales rate. This has slowed the rate of those. I think that's the point that she's trying to make.
Well, I don't know if the developer was clever to anticipate that or not, but most of the lots that are built that are debt allocated for these higher density, lower income units are some of the last to be built in those areas, those particular phases. So usually the people are already living in the house before these are ever started. I don't know if that.
And so I think there's probably a whole conversation we could have about phasing of homes and when they should be built. I think there's probably a logic to what they had on why they built those last to drive occupancy, but
it really doesn't matter. We still have to, our new ordinance has to be in compliance with SB 4 and 1851. And they don't get into that as a way to disallow.
I just want to clarify. In many cases, people who live in single homes don't like to have multi-unit apartment buildings, condos, whatever it's called, next to them, whichever city it is. It's just the way it is. I'm just giving it as an example that the new development has mostly single homes, big homes, and very few multi-apartment or condos. And Marina has much more those kind of multi-units, and it will only increase density inside Marina, but not in the new development. Was my main point, if it's clear enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, let me take my turn and we'll have another round, okay? My first comment is on page 4, section 17.51B is a table of the existing institutions that are the religious or quasi-public community, et cetera. My suggestion is to add a column on the end that lists the current zoning for each of the properties.
We can do that. That's fine.
To me, I think that would help in some clauses refer to R1 specifically and some, to other. So it might help from ease that you wouldn't have to look up what that particular property.
That's an easy fix.
On page 5, section 1751, D3, environmental review, there's two, let's see, paragraph 3 and paragraph 4.
Chair, could I interrupt? Didn't you submit these in writing to the
Yeah,
staff
yeah.
already?
Yeah, but they didn't, I submitted them around noon.
Right.
Give them sufficient time to.
But he has, but he has them in handwritten. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so are you saying that I should just let them take care of it and not put it in the record?
I would ask the director if he has them and if he's going to respond to you. To
Okay.
save the time of reading them again.
Okay, and then we don't want them in the official record.
They're already
other
in
than-
they'll be in the official record.
Oh, and respond to the
Right.
record.
Right.
So
Actually, I'm not sure that's.
That
Chair,
may not be true.
Chair St. John, it's really your call along with the commission is, we do have the comments and it's up to the commission. If the rest of the commission agrees with your comments, then we can just say, staff, please make these changes, or if you have questions, however the commission wants to run the meeting tonight, we're here at
Okay,
your
We're gonna
behest.
cut the time down
So-
and we let this be handled offline.
It's completely your right as the chair and the rest of the commission, how you want to run the meeting. So,
Well, if the commission isn't interested in hearing it and giving their comments, then we can let staff handle it in their convenience.
Are you asking for answers to the questions you submitted earlier?
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Some of them were questions and some of them were clarifications.
Yeah, is it possible to answer those?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Great.
Yeah, and I think,
absolutely, it's really up to the chair and how he wants to run the meeting. So,
Yeah, I would
so
I would prefer to let continue and let's see if we can get answers. If not, we can agree that it can be deferred to staff.
that's your right as the
Looking into
chair.
it.
That's completely your right.
That's how we've been handling it in the past. But just as a side note, I think it would be good if commissioners do a review before the meeting and have questions. And if some of them might be difficult to answer in the meeting, at least they could be to staff in advance of the meeting. And staff could take a look at it in preparation for the meeting, just like we do. So, okay, where were we?
You're on item number D3, which talks about,
The,
so section D has a couple different parts. One just basically says, if you're already exempt under SB4, then do not pass go straight to get your building permit.
right,
And I think what Bryce for D3 was trying to say, if you don't qualify under SB4, then you have to just do the normal CEQA environmental review process. Is that correct, Bryce?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
so can you give me an example of a simple project that like say a 3 or 4 unit apartment or condominium, something not elaborate that wouldn't qualify under SB4 and would then require an EIR under CEQA?
Sure. Yeah. So, again, I will say, yeah, thank you so much for passing along these questions beforehand. It lets us give better answers on the spot. So, yeah, I can absolutely give an example of that. So, something that wouldn't qualify for SB4 necessarily would be, for example, SB4 allows 20 units an acre on sites in the city of Marina. It's just how the law is written. A project that wouldn't qualify for SB4 streamlining would just be a project that goes slightly higher in that density or slightly higher in that height. So if, there was a 10-unit apartment building on a quite small site and it was at, 26 units an acre instead of 20 units an acre, that project would not qualify for the SB4 streamlining. So that's one example. Another example would be, if you wanted to take a really specific site that's currently listed in the ordinance, is the American Legion post that's out, closer in the neighborhood near the Walmart. There's, if that property owner came to the city and said, we want to use this ordinance to, to build housing on our large parking lot. This site technically does not qualify for SB4 outright because it's not owned by an educational or religious institution. But the city, we do want to include it in there because the city is interested in seeing housing on that site and in that neighborhood, or at least on part of that site. So that property owner would work through a traditional discretionary review process because that site is not included in SB4.
Okay. Thank you. That works. Next is page 6, subparagraph E2A, the getting into how to qualify for the affordable housing. I understand how the process would work for rental. 30% of income, 30% of the medium income, or whatever the terminology is. It's easy to calculate 30% of that person's income and seeing if that was, if his income was, say, $60,000, 30% would be 9,000. No, 1,800. And so if the unit was renting for 1,700, he qualifies, or even 1,800, he qualifies. But if they couldn't set the price at, let's say, $2,000, he wouldn't qualify, or the unit wouldn't qualify. Is that correct?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but yes, the intention behind that. Yeah.
How do you do it for sale? Suppose the units were for sale, and we've only defined 30% of the income. But what would you, if you're selling something, then it's a more complicated calculus.
Yeah, I used to manage like 300 BMR units when I was the planning manager in East Palo Alto. So it's, they look at your assets, how much stocks you have, if you have other properties, how much you have in your bank account. I mean, it's a whole thing to income qualify for these. So, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bryce, but I think you wrote max 30% of your monthly income, because that's generally an industry standard for affordable housing, that we don't want people to spend more than that, because if they do, there's potential they could foreclose on the property or don't have the income for the unit. And so 30% is like an industry standard for affordable housing for max. But in terms of going into the mechanics of it, that might be a little bit above this meeting, because I could give if the commission wants, we can come back and do a more detailed of how we break down income stuff in BMR units. But Bryce, is that correct? The 30%?
Right, that's correct. The 30% is just based on, what HCD considers appropriate for, an affordable, a person could typically afford rent that is, or monthly housing costs that is 30% of their income. And to just quickly address, how it's done for sale units. There's a whole calculus that, you're right, it is complicated. There's a whole calculus that HCD uses to determine what what expected mortgage rates are, what expected monthly housing costs are for a for sale unit. So if it's for sale for, a price that would be affordable for a lower income person, just as far as, some basic assumptions go with home buyer financing, that's how that's calculated. So basically monthly cost of ownership and financing of that.
My last comment was on page 8, subparagraph F2, alternative development standards compared to the development standards. The development standards list, for example, 18 units per acre for R1, but the non-development standards or alternative development standards was 40 units per acre for any of the R zones, even R1. Is that right? It's a huge difference, and more than 2 to 1.
So the intention of that was to basically not over incentivize the smaller scale project on sites where a larger scale project could happen. So the alternative development standards only require the project to comply with the citywide inclusionary housing ordinance, which only requires about 25% of units in the new project to be affordable. Whereas the enhanced affordability standard, where you see, that goes with projects where you see that, 40 units per acre density, that requires, close to 100% affordable. So, if the option is between providing 25% affordable units or 100% affordable units, we wanted to make sure that if the person is taking the the path where they provide fewer affordable units or a lower percentage of affordable units, we wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be able to build a giant project and only provide that number of units. So we wanted to kind of balance the incentives there.
Guess the same rationale would apply for the building height limits, where you could add another story if you had a larger group.
Correct. Yeah, that would be the same intention with the height requirements as well. So if we're going to allow a higher maximum height, then we'd want to see a higher percentage of units devoted to lower income housing.
When is the no off-street parking requirement when the property is located within a half-mile walking distance of public transit? Where is that applied? Where they don't have to provide one parking space off-site, which means within the property limits. They don't need to provide one parking space if they're within a half mile of the public transit.
That's the case for any housing project now. They just changed the state law under, I think it's AB 2907, Bryce. I think that's the number. If it's within a half mile of a major transit stop, that you don't have to provide any parking for residential. I think that's the number.
We were just briefed on that.
Okay. So that's not new to this.
No, it just got adopted about 2-3 years ago. So because we just updated our GIS maps to show. As a matter of fact, if you guys recall the 15-unit project off of Hillcrest here, they only provided 5 parking spaces. And they used that AB 2907 for that because they're within a half mile of the MST site. So that must have been within the last 2 years, I believe.
Okay.
So Bryce really, by writing that into the ordinance, he's just really confirming state law requirements.
Okay.
So
Got it. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Bryce. What's it? You're up.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Bryce, for the thing. I want to go back to the American Legion post because actually the reason I thought it was on there was completely different. Because I thought at some point they used it for some type of community church outreach. Which then goes back to, that does open up the question, especially now that you've said, no, we just added it. So we look at this, first off, just to confirm, we have no independent institutions of higher learning that would qualify that. That's why we have none of them listed in the table.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Want to make sure. Then number two is coming back to the American Legion post. I'm trying to understand. I totally understand the concept of that we would like to promote growth, especially towards the back parking lot there that they have. At the same time, trying to understand how we could add them to this overlay. If this overlay is based, this overlay is trying to describe what we're putting it into the overlay because it could meet the requirements of SB4, and that's why we've added that facility. Because otherwise, it doesn't really meet the concept of what we're talking about here, which is religious or institutional higher education.
Sure. Yeah.
well,
So
go ahead, Bryce. I think the definition of institutional was broader. Is that correct, Bryce?
that's correct. Yeah. And part of the intention with this overlay is to expand on the projects that would be allowed under SB4. So we were looking at a kind of a wider variety of institutional type sites. So the American Legion Post in our discussions was considered a community institution. And there's, underutilized parking lot. And so it seemed like a good candidate for this type of ordinance, to include it in this type of ordinance. I think we're open to other types of, or other community institution sites in a similar category, and we're open to removing it from the list as well.
Okay, and that's where we basically, under paragraph 3, we basically turned everything into quasi-public community institutions in the policy. That's where we labeled it, reworded it that way.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure. I mean, overall, I agree with the policy. I mean, I like the overall policy. Again, I think beginning, I absolutely would recommend that the beginning of it is reworded because I just think it doesn't do a good job in section 1751 on purpose and intent. I think it's not written poorly. I think it's just written very regulatory. And that if you just want to talk about purpose, that's one thing. If we want to talk about intent, we should make it more about what we're trying to do with the role in setting our workability standards, what we're trying to do to meet the state standards of limiting local discretion, and emphasizing that we're trying to use underutilized institutional lands. I think that's an important thing which now goes back to the American Legion Post. In addition to that, I get, and this is the separate part. The purpose is that it's a housing shortage, and to meet the RENA obligations, I completely get why we're putting it in there because that's the regulation that drives it. At the same time, as we discussed last month with Marina Landing, as it came out, we don't need RENA housing right now. We have overachieved by thousands of units currently in the city. So adding a few more units of infill here and there is not necessarily about RENA. It's about doing the right thing to support our low income populations. So I'm still pretty adamant that I would like to see paragraph 1751 rewritten, and I kind of have rewritten it somewhat. I don't know how to even present that as a paragraph to the commission. Secondarily, I'm gonna come back to the issue of density, and I understand what we're trying to do, and I understand we have limited properties that actually would qualify for higher densities just because of the size of the properties. But I agree that in our communities, when we get down into this, building a high density, we're saying right now that under the survey that we went out and took, we had a couple of respondents that actually communicated outside of the survey, and that they engaged in one specifically engaged in a formal kind of post-survey conversation, and they all implemented that, indicated, hey, right now we don't want to go with high density. That does not mean, though, that as soon as we pass this policy, that we turn around and we end up with a policy that allows for high density. They come back 2 years from now and they say, you know, something, we really would like to build a complex that's 3 stories tall and that has 40 units in it because we've got the space and we meet the requirements. And then I think that really, what are we really trying to address by doing that? If we don't have a RENA requirement because we have met those requirements, now we're just building a lot of extra units that are potentially turning into at that point, an income source for the institution versus meeting the numbers, then I'm not sure I agree.
Aren't our RENA numbers kind of speculative over the years? Like this particular cycle, we said this, and then next cycle.
I mean, they're, you know, depending on who you talk to, but at AMBAG, they do use some, you know, good metrics in terms of coming up with the
Yeah,
number.
but I mean, how far over? I mean, we're not talking 50 units over or close to the limit of what we were asked to build. What is our over under on RENA right now for this cycle?
We're building approximately 2,000 units above our RENA. But I would point out to the commission that this is a program in our housing element. And so we do have to, in some way, shape or form, get this across the goal line. And if we can certainly take edits to that 1751A or however and, you know, to the size of the units. Yeah, those are all good edits that we can certainly take in. So,
and I could just send it to you. I mean, basically all I'm trying to do is provide a little more non-technical context, and I can email and I will copy all the commissioners on it. I mean,
we shouldn't be copying commissioners on email, so that violates the Route Act. But I would just say, if the commission agrees with your edits, Vice Chair, we would just.
So how would you like me to present my edit to the?
I understood, and I think Bryce understood that you're wanting us to edit 1751A purpose intent to make it less regulatory and more focus on our discussion today, which is trying to utilize underutilized parcels to further enhance viability of housing. That kind of language. Is that correct, Vice Chair?
And to make some of the language less. We can keep the legal requirements we have to, but if we can change some of the words from, like, what's the typical word? The next to last sentence is incentivize, change it to encourage. And I know that seems small, but it's something that people they will understand encourage versus incentivized.
That is a completely appropriate edit. And if the rest of the commission concurs, then Bryce and I can make that edit.
That's fine. So. Like I said, I mean, other than that, though, I think the density and the size, I understand we have to go that way. I agree that I think we should look at that. We have to look at the worst case, because once we pass this, I don't want to come back and have to readdress this, because all of a sudden we have something coming before us that asks for something that is really outsized for the community that's putting into. And so I'll just leave it at that. Thanks. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe Director Crindle and Brian could help me to understand this. In the staff report, section D, housing development project meeting RIHO standards are permitted by right. And under item 4, section D, item 4, The administrative approval is ministerial in nature and may be conducted at the staff level under the general directions of the community development director without notice or hearing. And item 5, approval. The community development director shall approve any applications and compliance with all requirements of these sections. So by permitted by right, doesn't mean staff approve and no planning commissioner hearing and no public hearing.
Those are the ones that are fully compliant, but I think Bryce explained earlier that for those that are not fully consistent, under the, maybe you can help me out, Bryce, find the section that talks about the discretionary.
In the report
Um,
section D. And the beginning, the heading, and the item 4 and item 5.
So I think this was raised in one of Commissioner St. John's questions that he sent earlier today as well. And in reading back, yeah, I guess it would be 1 second. Yeah, section D3 and D4. In reading back from Commissioner St. John's question, in reading that back, the subsection 4 is intended to be defining what ministerial approval means for SB4 compliant projects. So it's not intended to just blanket say that projects can be ministerially approved if they comply with just the development standards in the ordinance. But I can understand why that's not absolutely crystal clear. So I think it would make sense to adjust some of the language of subsection 4 to make it clear that the ministerial approval does not necessarily apply to all projects that are viable under just the requirements of the RIHO.
So how would you adjust it?
I think I would have to put my head together with Guido and take a look at it really closely and just do a line by line.
Yeah, so
again.
Bryce, I would just say that if we get a favorable recommendation today, we've already heard from the vice chair about the intent. And then if the commission does want to make a favorable recommendation, part of the motion could be to direct staff to look at section D4 of the ordinance, and that we will try to clean that up to make it more clear if that's amenable to the commission.
And yeah,
First for me,
I agree on that. We just have to look at section D again.
what we have to also, what Guido and Bryce will also have paramount on their mind is compliance with SB4 and AB 1581,
So we have to modify the
1851.
have to modify the motion, right? If you
Right, but
Yeah.
to take a look at any rewrites to make D4, section D4 clearer, clarified.
okay, have to add that to the motion. So-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so right now we have this was our base recommended motion. Number 3 of that could be once again to 1751A, that we will identify ways to better summarize what we talked about, the intent of the ordinance, not just the typical regulatory language.
Mhm.
And then for subsection D4, that Bryce and I will get direction from the commission to make this more clear about what's a ministerial approval versus what's not, if that's amenable to the commission.
Yeah, and also section B, table 1, to add the zoning column.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's important also to enhance the public transparency and also encourage community meeting and so that everything to build the trust with the community. Thank you very much.
Okay. So Commissioner Barron, did you have any comments that required edits to the draft resolution?
I agree with Vice Chair
Okay.
Woodson about the word incentivize.
Okay,
I suggest using support. That's one of my concerns. As for the size of the units, I guess it's not part of this.
Yeah, it's
conversation.
possible to relook at the size.
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay, if the commission wants, we can look at, section, F2, 2E, there was concerns about under alternative development standards, the size of the units. That's something that Bryce and I, if
Yeah.
the commission wants, we can also take a look at that. Are those really affordable by design? I guess that was the question.
Yes.
That's something we can take a look at.
Especially for the 2 and 3 bedroom units.
Alternate development, section 2, alternate developer standards, E, all
E,
units
yes.
shall be the 800 square foot, 1400, 1800. Those might be,
And if we are looking at this nitpicking, I also don't like FB, the maximum height that allows for the new units to be 1 story greater than the maximum building height of the underlying zone. And I would ask why. Why allow this to be higher than the rest of the
area.
structures in the area? So I would definitely not accept that.
That's completely within the commission's right to make that recommendation. I would say that we've had that in a couple of the ordinances we've brought to the commission as a way to, as Vice Chair Woodson said, to incentivize potentially these projects. But if the commission doesn't want that, we can certainly take that out. That can be within your right.
So these are my main points. Thank you.
If these every one of these opportunities would be strictly infill, as opposed to a greenfield. And for a greenfield, we can, even though it would, if it was residential, it would have a strict zoning of 3 stories or something like that. But we could give add an extra story for incentivizing it.
That's correct.
Yeah, but since these, I agree with Commissioner Barron that the extra story, even though it might incentivize, it might not be very practical for all of a sudden we've got a 5-story apartment building on a parking lot.
And that's completely within the commission's discretion.
Good. Thank you. Okay, we'll take that out. Take that out.
Okay, that's within your right. So,
All right. Anything else from the chair? Okay, let's see if we have a motion. advance.
So just because I have to go back and edit this ordinance with Bryce, so 1751A, you want us to clean it up, make it less legalistic, talk about kind of what we talked about today about incentivizing the use of these properties. Under section B, showing all the properties you want us to give the zoning. So we know what parts of the ordinance apply. Under D4, you asked us to kind of clean that up in terms of really articulating what is a ministerial approval. Under F1B, you asked us to take out the maximum additional height. And you asked us to take a look at F2E about the maximum size of the units to really make sure that those are affordable by design. And those are the extent of the edits that I have for the commission. If I've missed something, please let me know.
I think you got it.
That matches my notes.
Yeah.
Guido, were you thinking of doing these edits once a motion is made, like live or after the fact?
We got direction just to make the edits after. So
Okay, I just wanted to add one clarification that I think the proposed clarifications to D are more than in just D4. And I just want to state this for the record that I think part of the confusion might be because the introductory language that comes right after D, application and review, it says housing development projects meeting RIHO standards are permitted by right and subject to ministerial review. But really, what I think Bryce was saying before is that it's projects that meet SB4 standards, not RIHO. So that should be clarified there. Bryce, do you agree?
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so it would be that introductory paragraph, and then I think under 4 we could I have some suggestions there I can discuss with Bryce and Guido offline, and then I think we might want to make further conforming changes to 5 and 6 as well. So I think it's actually throughout that whole section, just to clarify.
5 and 6. If the commission is amenable to those, we can make those edits offline.
So that's a D, 4, 5, and 6
4, 5, and 6, right?
of D.
That's correct.
If we are negotiating unit size and height, I would like to add one more thing. If maximum density, somebody mentioned, what if somebody comes up in a few years and say, I want to put 40 units and so forth. Maybe we can reduce the numbers here. Instead of 40 and 50 units, dwelling units per acre, we just reduce it right now. So in the future, we can avoid the fight about somebody wanting to put a 50 unit apartment dwelling in somebody's backyard. They have to be fight the city to reduce it to 25 or 28.
Bryce, what was your logic or your backup for the 40 unit or residential areas and 50 units per acre for non-residential?
Given the city's previous interest in going above and beyond the minimum required by state law, we chose those 40 units an acre in residential and 50 units an acre in commercial, just as a an aggressive goal. But if there is an interest in bringing those numbers down slightly, there's still room to go above and beyond what's required by state law, but not as high as 40 and 50 units an acre.
What is the minimum? What is the state law requirement?
For SB4, the required in the city of Marina is 20 dwelling units per acre in residential underlying zones and then 40 units an acre in commercial or non-residential indwelling zones.
Based on Commissioner Barron, based on state law minimums 20 and 40, what would you nominate that's more aggressive?
What the state law determines. The number the state law determines, the 2040, you said?
Oh, to say only comply with state law, don't be more aggressive.
Yeah, we are already doing well. So why,
The only thing I would point out is this is part of our pro-housing application, and part of getting the pro-housing designation is that we're trying to show the state we're not just doing the bare bones minimum. So if there's some consideration for that, because this ordinance we promised as part of the pro-housing. So the density, that would be something that either if the commission really wants to chew on that, we can talk about it here. Or if you can give us the latitude as staff to verify that we're not violating our kind of pro-housing going above the minimum requirements. So we could research that one a little bit more if that's amenable to the commission.
well, yeah, so we can look at some percentage, maybe 10% more or something like that. I think that the 40 dwelling is double from the minimum. 50 is only 10 unit extra. So
20%.
25%, yeah.
Well,
the 50,
the 50 is 20% of,
25% of 40,
above the 40. Yeah.
yeah.
okay, so let's consider something that would look a little bit more agreeable, but not as high as this, since we are already in compliance, as I understand.
If
So
we took,
anybody,
if we took 25% for the R1 or the residential, 25% of the minimum would be another 5. So that would be
25.
instead of 20, it would be 25. And using the 20% for, I don't think any of ours are in a commercial zone, but they might be. Do you know if any of our churches are currently in commercial zones?
I think there's a couple in the downtown, but I hear what the commission's saying. So if you want to go 25% above the minimum 20 and 25% above the minimum 40, we can certainly build that into the
That would be
ordinance.
consistent.
So
Yeah.
as long as we're going above the minimum and not affecting our pro-housing designation,
yes,
because we need to continually show the state that we're not just doing the bare bones minimum.
Right.
I agree.
So,
Okay.
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 Yep. So we've got 25.
25%.
And 50 are the two numbers.
20.
Instead of 40 per acre for the residential, we become 25, and we stay with the 50 for the commercial.
Right. Sounds good.
So each of the state's bare minimum, we've increased by 25%.
Thank you. Trying to keep the city whole with all of our stuff with the state. Thank you.
All right. So I think we can make the motion with these addendums.
Sounds good. So somebody has to
Somebody,
if you want to just restate the motion or direct staff to follow the motion as we've discussed, and then just have a second on the motion, then we can move on. So,
put the motion back on the meeting.
Bryce, if you want to pull up the motion. Do you want to pull up the last slide that shows the motion, Bryce?
Yes.
We have a brave person. Vice Chair.
I make a motion that Bryce Henry, oh, sorry. Got it. All right, recommendation. Read it, go through these three, the way it's documented here. Rita?
Yes.
Okay. So. Wow, that's gonna. I'm gonna give it 10 seconds until you tell me I'm ready.
Okay, we're ready.
All right. That would have been hard to make that as you were changing it. Okay. I make a motion that we recommend that we adopt a motion recommending to the city council to adopt ordinance amending Title 17 zoning ordinance to implement program 1.4 of the housing element. I would prefer that, like the city of Marina housing element. We find that the adoption of the ordinance is exempt from California environmental quality CEQA per section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines. And we request that the following changes be clarified in the motion before it goes to city council. That clarify the ministerial approval section, add columns to the table with the underlying zone, changing the purpose and intent sections, taking a second look at the maximum unit sizes, removing the maximum height increase, and looking at reducing the maximum density from 25 to
225.
from 2 to, that's not right,
There we go.
to 25 and 50.
50 is not changed.
Yeah, 50, hold on, respectively, to ensure that we meet the continuing guidance of RIHO.
Second.
I second that motion.
So Commissioner Barron,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodson,
Yes. but-
Chair St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yes.
Hold on. Did you have a friendly amendment you want to change to it? Van Board did. Okay. Oh. No. No, we don't need. Did you, did you want to make an amendment to the way the motion was written? Okay. Okay.
No, I just mentioned that the clarify the ministerial approval sections and maybe should we add to include public hearing?
So no, he can add a friendly amendment. He can request that as a friendly amendment. And then we would vote on whether we agree with the friendly.
All right.
Since I made
Yeah,
the motion, I would then have to agree or disagree on the friendly amendment,
correct.
and then we would take a vote on that.
Thank you.
So we're teaching you everything now. So, Paul, so what, Guido, can we go back through that? Because I think when we get down to it, Commissioner Chang wants to make a friendly amendment.
So he has to request a friendly amendment, somebody has to second it, and then you can make
Correct.
but what section are you asking for a friendly amendment for? That's in the motion. For which section, Commissioner Chang? The what subsection, Commissioner Chang?
He's trying to find it.
Well,
Ministerial approval section form. That is equal.
that's already in the base motion that Bryce is showing up on the
I think-
screen.
So
Because the same job we talk here.
Isn't the way D4 written, is it notice of public hearing is recommended from applicants? Bryce, isn't that the way it's written right now? I recommend encourage, I think. Is encouraged, so current. Correct.
If the commission wants, you can mandate the community meeting. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could be potentially be in violation of state law. So the whole point of this ordinance is to actually streamline development. So it would be potentially problematic to make people do a public hearing when the whole point of the ordinance is to actually streamline development.
Right.
Yeah,
And
so
a community meeting is not a public hearing.
I've just been scanning the law to see if there's any express prohibition on public hearing. You could just, to get around this issue for now, we could just say to the extent allowed by state law, the planning commission may hold or shall hold a public hearing on the issue. But I mean, you're right that it would just be an airing of any public concerns, but you'd be very limited in terms of what you can actually do to respond to them.
If it's a ministerial approval, then it doesn't sit before the city council or the planning commission.
he understands that, I think, but his point
And
is,
so we are the public hearing moderator.
but his point is that if it's controversial to the public and they don't agree with it, that he feels like there should be a requirement that there's a public hearing. So he has a right to make that suggestion.
Yeah.
I think that the answer, if I understand it correctly, is that the current state policy is twofold. That number one, the intent of REHO and S4 overlaying it is that the idea is to provide a streamlined approach, because historically what has happened is that state regulations have been used by those who may not support the development to slow down the process and even restrict the development from ever occurring. And by making a mandatory public hearing, what they end up doing is they delay the requirements and they almost become obstructionist. And so that the way this regulation is written is to say when it goes to ministerial approval, just like we have for any of the other SB4 items that have come before the council, the commission, or I guess council, is that we are removing those impediments at the state level to remove that control from the city planning commission's decision matrix, so that we can't actually provide that. That's what SB4 and RHO here are restricting us from doing. So even though we say this, and this is where we get into a gray area, we could put that into our regulation. However, if we do that, we are setting ourselves up that if a petitioner came in and wanted to do something and we turn around and say, oh yeah, you have to have a public hearing, and that could actually turn off your permit, then they would have a legal ground to sue against the city for violating the state standards of SB4 and RHO. Is that correct, Seth?
Yeah, and I'm seeing that is correct. But however, I am seeing in this particular law, Bryce, let me know if you've dealt with this before, that under L5, it does say that design review of the development may be conducted by the planning commission or the city council as appropriate, but it shall be objective and strictly focused on assessing compliance required for streamlined ministerial review. So that it is allowed specifically by the law, but to what Glenn was just saying, it shall not, I think there's some language in here saying it shall not chill. Yeah, it shall not in any way chill, inhibit, or preclude ministerial approval. And then there's some timelines below that the city has to adhere to. So you'd still have to adhere to those approval timelines, even if you were choosing to hold public hearings. Bryce, have you dealt with this before? Have you ever worked this into an ordinance expressly, or no?
No, not. This is our first SB4 implementation ordinance. But as far as leaving the door open for design review at the state level, I'm wondering if that allows, public hearing by or a public meeting by a design review board or something like that, or just review of the project against objective standards at the staff level.
So Seth, if we, or Paul, Commissioner Chang, if we went with the way that Seth has described it, basically I can't remember exactly the way you phrased it, so I have to.
He phrased it to say, and to potentially allow a public hearing as allowed by state law, or what that some type of verbiage to that effect.
Would you allow that as a modification of the words to your friendly amendment?
Yeah, I agree.
I think my language is that the city shall provide for a public hearing. You could say before the planning commission. Then you could say to the extent allowed under state law. And what that would do is sort of implicitly refer back to the subdivision L, and then including the timeframes under it, right? So you'd have to staff in scheduling the item and have to make sure that it doesn't chill or preclude the development either by some qualitative effect, right, of merely holding the hearing, and also in terms of the deadlines that it might run up against. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah, by doing that, I want to enhance transparency of what we are doing, so the community know.
Right, so, I think the friendly amendment was amended in wording based on my recommendation to address what the phrasing that he just had.
Right. You need a second to that, and you can just
And then
take the
I
motion.
would- So is there somebody who would, I would agree to that friendly amendment. Is there somebody who would second that?
Well, I have a question before we go on. Who's requesting this hearing? Are we requesting a hearing and making them come in? Or is the public requesting it?
Was.
I think that needs to be clear, because I didn't understand that part. And then we'd be
yeah.
required to expedite that hearing so that we don't interfere with the timelines.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Chang, he can correct me if I'm wrong, what he's trying to get at is, and what SEP has said is, there would be a public hearing. We'd have to follow all the housing bill's requirements, and it would be a very limited public hearing, because if you meet all the objective zoning requirements, we would have a hearing, and basically we would be telling the planning commission, well, you basically have to approve this project. Right. But we would still have the hearing if that's the will of the body, if that's what you guys want us to add to the ordinance.
Yeah. And that kind of addresses Commissioner Barron's issue about, I don't want four stories next to my, so that would give them an opportunity to complain about that.
We took that one out.
Well, whatever it is, if the public had a
Well, it's still
comment,
3 stories.
Right.
if the public had a comment, if the public had a concern about anything, they could raise it there. And in the end, we'd still drive down a path, but we've given them a chance to speak.
Right.
But ultimately, I mean,
That seems fair.
I think what we're doing is we're giving the public an opportunity. Unfortunately, like many things, our hands are very much tied by the city or by the state. And we have that opportunity to explain it to the public and remind them again that this is a lot of what has been, that is not coming from us necessarily. So I think it's a good decision.
Just to Commissioner Jacobson, just to come full circle, the gentleman that came today for his ADU in the coastal zone, the ADUs in the coastal zone, so it requires a coastal permit. But the staff report we're going to write to you guys basically says it's an ADU, we have to approve it, but it's in the coastal zone. And because it's in the coastal zone, we have to bring it to you guys. Right. So it'll be a similar type of, but to address Commissioner Chang and Barron's concerns, you're at least giving somebody a venue by which to say, hey, I know you can't really do much, but I really don't like it. It stinks, right? But at least to give Commissioner Barron and Chang their potential opponents an opportunity to express concern, right? So
I'm sure more people will oppose 3-story buildings next to their homes. This is a very common issue. as well as high density.
Two-story buildings next to their home.
Yeah, even that. I mean, I'm just looking to the future, trying to avoid lawsuits and complaints.
Thank you for the amendment.
All right, so we haven't taken this back. We haven't, actually, you run this. So we have a friendly amendment.
Yeah, we have a
Yes.
friendly
We need
amendment.
it seconded.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
Okay, so we now have a friendly amendment. It's been seconded. So the revised motion for paragraph 3 is that we recommend that we review and make the following changes, which will include clarifying the ministerial approvals of section D, adding a column or table to underlying zones, changing the purpose and intent sections, updating the purpose and intent sections, taking a second look at the maximum height, removing the maximum height limit increases, looking at reduction in the maximum density to 25 per acre in residential zones, adding language directing the city to provide for a public meeting to the extent allowed by state law.
sounds
Okay,
good.
I made a motion.
You have a second.
Second time today.
All right,
Right.
Commissioner Barron,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodson,
Yes.
Chair St. John.
Yes.
Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. That was a.
Thanks, Steph, for the help with that. And Bryce.
Can I say I appreciate how thoughtful the commission was on that, trying to balance staff interests with the pro housing, and you guys, that was a very complex subject you guys just took up. So thank you for all the deliberation.
Okay, let's move on now. We to item 8 on our agenda. Informational items. Number 1 or A is new recusal maps for the commissioners. Did everybody
Yes.
get a copy?
So everybody in their packet has their own recusal maps. We can certainly give training, but in general, if you're within 500 feet of a project, you should generally recuse yourself. If it's from 501 to 1,000 feet, that's the second circle on the map. Please talk to me and I'll work with Sep, our deputy city attorney, because there's a little bit more of an involving test. But I've updated these maps because Commissioner Simmons is now on the commission. So yeah, so just use those as a guidance. But at any time, if any item comes before the commission, if you don't feel comfortable or whatever, please reach out to me and then I can work with Sep, our deputy city attorney, to answer your recusal questions.
Guido, just one quickie on the recusal map. When is the 1,000-foot generally applied as opposed to the 500-foot? I would say the 500-foot is always there, but when do you expand it to 500 to 1,000?
Well, the 1,000-foot buffer is always there. And Sep, you can step in and correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong. But anything over 501 to 1,000 feet, if you're within that of a project that's going to come before the commission, then reach out to me, and then it's more of a detailed legal analysis that Sep has to do with you.
Okay.
But if you're
Yeah,
within 500 feet of a project, you should just by right recuse yourself. Is that correct, Seb?
That's basically it. The easiest way to describe it is, so to answer the commissioner's question, both of the radii always apply. It's just the legal standard differs depending on which one you're within. So Guido is correct that if the project you're looking at is, these are just adjudicatory projects, right? They're quasi-adjudicative, meaning like a permit application or an appeal, for instance, then there's a presumption, right? It goes to the burden of proof, basically. So there's a presumption that you have a reasonably foreseeable material financial interest if it's within 500 feet. But then the presumption flips once you go beyond 500 feet, and the burden is on someone else to show that you do. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that's why Guido's saying that we still want to do the analysis if you're within 500 to 1,000 feet to make sure you're not at risk if you participate. Does that make sense?
I do have one question on that. I know it's going to be coming up, I'm assuming relatively soon, on the Sea Haven Park. Just a very small portion of the park is within my 500 feet. So,
Like, you're lucky. We're almost actually done. I don't think the commission, that's going to be more of a public works commission and a city council thing.
okay.
So I think you should be good, but thank you for letting us know. Yeah, thank you.
But I think even then, if it's a multi-part discussion, we can always isolate him from that part of the discussion that's inside the boundary. So my question is, I know this is weird, but it's a duplicate. I don't want to create a precedent for us that then we don't execute for our regulations. And so this is is center of mass. So the radius in our exclusionary zone is the center of mass of our properties, which I'm assuming is kind of driven by probably Google Maps or wherever the start point was. We just threw a radius off of that. That's great, except that, and this goes back to Seth's kind of comment of what happens if a project is just outside the boundary type of one. But yet my property, the center of mass for my property, for example, my property is 100 feet deep and it's 60 feet wide. So that 50 feet, if you go to the edge of my property versus not, could put me, like right now, it puts me within 5 feet of the edge. If I use the center of mass, I'm within 75 feet of the new project that just came before us on the underground pipeline extension on Rain Dollar. They gave us the last meeting. But if I look at this from this map, if I look at it from the actual map of where my property boundary is, I'm within 10 feet. So I raised that because we've just passed the ADU, not ADU, STR discussion. And we basically turned that into a 50-foot from the perimeter, not center of mass. We set it at 55 feet. And I raised that, Guido, to say, I understand that this is a circle. It's the easiest thing to do. But I also think that the map should be off the perimeter of our property boundaries to be realistic. I know that requires a little more work. And this is maybe it's OBE, because the idea is that if it's outside the 500 but less than 1,000, you're still going to look at it.
What does the state require for recusal? Where
500 feet, but I think
is it from a property line or from center of mass?
it's
Normally.
500.
Well, what's the legal interpretation of 500 feet?
Well, so I guess I don't know, but I don't know if it makes a difference. And this is so my point.
Theoretical interpretation.
My point is, I just want to make sure I understand it right, that the way that you have written the map, the way that you are interpreting the overlay is 500 feet center of mass. However, if we have if we are still going to, as the planning department, anything that is between 500 feet and 1,000 feet is still going to be reviewed. So then that kind of center of mass versus edge perimeter doesn't make a difference. But I think we need to make that clear somewhere, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just.
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, this is not a Google map. This is actually a GIS map. It's a little more precise. Really, the overall goal of all of this is to keep you as commissioners from getting a nasty letter from the FPPC. So if you're within 500 feet of a property, you should just recuse yourself. If it's 501 to 1,000, we can work with you. If you're 5 or 10 feet away in terms of how your boundary, that's my direction to you as the commissioner is to reach out to me. And then we will work with SEP in terms of, if we need to do some deeper analysis, but really these maps are just kind of a guide.
And I'm not trying to cause problems, I just,
yeah.
what I'm trying to do is trying to be fair, that we're setting policy for residents on other items that come before our agenda. And then in the background, if they turn around and look at this and said, well, you did center a mass on hers. I want us to be able to legally explain to them, okay, yes, we did, but understand.
Yeah, but the STR is, and SEP can correct me if I'm wrong, but you as an individual commissioner, we're not voting on an STR permit within your 500 feet, and Sep can correct me on the legalese, you were
But we set,
setting,
we
you
put
were
it at 55 feet.
you were setting broad policy that affects all the properties within the city of Marina. And so Sep can correct me, but I don't believe that's a conflict because you are taking an objective analysis of something that affects the whole citywide. You are not directly voting on an STR, either 55 feet, 500 feet, or whatever that might be. Is that correct, Seb?
We
Yeah.
don't know that.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry.
I understand that. I think it's going on.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt whoever was speaking. I couldn't see though.
That's fine. I mean, I think my point isn't that it violated. It's that from a perception perspective, we set 50 feet and on the perimeter for anybody to say that we couldn't have two STRs within 50 feet of each other, which effectively could affect somebody trying to have one across from each other, but allow something at an angle. And that's all. It's just a perception issue that we can be able to explain it, that we don't really have these double set of standards on how we review things.
I think I understand what you're saying. So the FPPC regulation so I will say, as a practical matter, it's very common for cities to issue these conflict maps using a circle drawn from the center of the property. I guess that's what you mean when you say center of mass. But as a legal matter, the rule is from the property line. So really what it should look like is weird bubbles that look kind of like your property boundary, but they're going to look a little more rounded, you know? So, I mean, we could either, I don't know how much effort it would take Guido to redraw them, or I think what really is done is when we see something in the gray area, Commissioner, we would take a close look at it and make sure we're using the right, you know, this is like a guide, this document.
Yeah, and that's it. And I completely understand it. I just want to make sure that we understand that if somebody from the public came in and said, well, why did you do this? And you do this for us and you keep things straightforward and say, founder, but then you do this for yourself. As long as we can explain it and it's in the policy so that it could just be a note at the bottom that says, hey, this is how we do this.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be fair. Again, it's about being transparent to the residents so that we have consistency across when we start setting these kind of
Understood
influence. That's it. So thank you. I'm just a troublemaker.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. The informational items, 8.B, Senate Bill 707 is the Brown Act. And it's on.
Yeah, so among all the other bills we're tracking for the Planning and Community Development Department, SB 707 mandates I give you guys a copy of the Brown Act. So you now have the Brown Act. Good luck reading it. But if you have any form of insomnia, then please read. If we do have a new commissioner, Sep and I can give a Brown Act. I think we've done it a couple times. But you know, for the whole body, if that's something the commission wants, we can certainly do some very generic Brown Act training. So yeah, but which, by the way, has changed with all of the hybrid meetings and Zoom meetings and all that stuff. So there have been some changes. So
Okay, item C, informational item C, streamlining planning commission meetings.
So the chair and I went out for a lunch a couple weeks ago, and these were ideas in terms of what we can do to potentially further streamline these meetings. And the chair can chime in. So the chair actually did what him and I spoke about 2 weeks ago, which is providing the questions early. This is actually really helpful for staff. Our job is to answer these questions at the public meeting, but if you have detailed questions that you want answered, they probably do take a little bit of research. So if you are able to give us your questions ahead of time, then we can probably get you better answers at the public hearing. So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion could be to have 5 to 8 minutes per planning commissioner per topic. That's another way to further streamline the meetings. And we did vote to move the meetings to 6 p.m. If there is an opportunity to have them at 5:30 to get us here earlier. So those were just some of the things that the chair and I were talking about, but it really requires input from the rest of the commission.
Yeah, we're missing one member tonight. So let's defer.
Okay.
Taking another look at the start time of the meetings
Okay,
until we have a full house.
Okay.
But we can be thinking about it if it's possible to move it up to 5:30.
5:30 in the morning.
I think Marina works until 4 to 5 in Monterey,
Yeah.
so he might not be able to make it here by 5:30.
Telling you, if you did it at 5:15 in the morning, and you all have a regular normal day job that starts, that would be the most efficient way to get into it tonight.
Okay. But on the other topics, is the commission open to, if there's very technical, detailed questions, doing your best to send us those questions early? I don't know if the commission agrees with that or not.
It's fine.
Absolutely.
Because I thought Commissioner St. John giving this to us, even though Commissioner Jacobson said, hey, you already have those, it actually was helpful that I have them written down. So when we go back to build the motion, it's there. So
I think I might pick on that one. I think that when we send those questions in, if there are things that would be pertinent to the bigger group, they can't just be addressed behind the scenes. And I trust the staff would make that determination that those things can either be reread back to us to cover, and Guido could take the lead on that and say, okay, I addressed 1, 2, and I addressed 1 and 3, but 2, 4, and 6 need to be addressed, and then we cover those in the meeting. But I think I wouldn't want us to, again, going back to transparency, hide the fact from the public that, oh, we had these 3 other questions, we've addressed them offline.
that makes total sense. Yeah, we will always err on the side of transparency. But when we get these super technical questions like St. John did, you could see that Bryce actually came prepared to answer them. So yeah, we will always try to answer them at the public meeting if that's okay with the commission. So. And then the other one, and this is really up for the whole commission to decide. Do you want to limit discussion to 5 to 8 minutes per commissioner per topic? Is that too restrictive? Yes or no? That's really up for the commission to decide. The pro of that is that you would force commissioners to really, really read the packet ahead of time and then come prepared, right? The flip side of that is you may not have gotten the full deliberative discussion you got tonight, which I thought you guys did a great job. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there. It's really up to the commission.
I would.
That 5 to 8 minutes does not include discussion time, right?
It's totally up to the commission.
I think it's a good move to limit it. However, if the questions are coming along and it's pertinent and we don't want to not answer that question or not get that question, does the chair have the ability to say you may continue even though your time has expired?
That's completely up to the chair and vice chair.
I don't want this to turn into
I
a
think that
Washington
Yeah.
DC Senate meeting
Yeah.
city council.
And my time.
or even a city council meeting.
Yeah, I don't, as a past chair, I mean, my take is I would not want to do that. I think that down the road sets a potential for adversarial feelings across the commission. I think you do a good job of managing this. Sometimes you look at the timeline and it doesn't work. I think a lot of that can be managed by the chair. That's my opinion as somebody who's been in a chair position. But I will defer to him on his thoughts on this.
I think this is my second or third meeting in this chair, so I would defer to
I mean, I think
vice chairs.
one thing I do like about what the city council does, and I've seen this in other councils also, is I do think maybe we can look at restricting first contact for discussions to 3 to 5 minutes limit on our side, just so that we ensure that we kind of get a breadth of experience before we then go out to public comment and then come back to discussion on our side. And I think I missed that at times myself. And that way everybody gets to kind of have their input the first time. they can prioritize what is important to them, knowing that there's going to be a restriction. They can't just raise the questions. And I tried to manage that myself and kind of make sure that I gave everybody that capability. But if we put that in writing, I think that that makes it easier for the chair to get up to speed more quickly. So, because there's just an efficiency time that it takes somewhere in the position.
One of the things we limit our public comment specifically and try to manage it to 3 minutes. And we do a pretty good job of managing it to 3 minutes. But to publicize that commissioners have 5 minute or even 8 minute, I don't want the public to be managing the commission.
Yeah.
Does that have to be published?
No.
I'm sorry?
Does this have to be published?
I mean, we can either have it be an informal policy of the commission, or we've actually adopted the city council rules and procedures, and we can just amend it by adding this stuff to it. It's really the gist of this is you guys are all volunteering your time. I get paid to be here. If we stay here till 1 o'clock in the morning, I still get paid, but you're volunteers. So these are really suggestions to help you in your life.
You get paid
And
extra.
so it's really a group decision. It's not something that's going to go to council and be codified or whatever. So
You just found out?
yes, we just.
I would make a comment, but I would get in trouble. I mean, literally, so I'll just keep my mouth shut.
I can make a comment.
Please go ahead.
I feel that mostly people don't violate the time, and we finish the meetings a lot of times, not a lot of times, but many times, very quickly.
Okay.
We are not city council. Let me make a point. We don't sit until 2 a.m. We break sometimes after half an hour.
Right.
So nobody really violates it. And
Okay.
I think if I had to think, I have 3 minutes, I probably will speak even less than I speak now. I think I don't speak that much, but sometimes I'm on a roll, but it's very rare. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a very good point.
It is a
that
good
We
point.
don't want to play to one bias towards one side of the commission versus another side of the commission on how they interact with the group. And
All right.
that's a good
So
point.
I think what I hear the commission saying is we'll forestall the voting for the start time. There is an encouragement that if you have your technical questions, to get them into staff early, but to err on the side of transparency. If we do get those like we did today, we'll make copies of it and we'll talk about it during the meeting. And we're not going to go forward with the 5 to 8 minutes per commissioner per topic.
We can think about it in our
Yeah.
mind and try to
Okay.
be reasonable and not get off topic or outside the law,
Right.
but we'll keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
So let's go to item 9, announcements. You have one?
So we're really fortunate in our CDD budget. We've been able to hire a lot of really great interns, and Hadi is our current intern. So he's going to introduce himself. He will be presenting an item to commission on May 28th. So it's first time presenting to you guys. So
Yes, good evening.
Welcome, Hadi.
Thank you so much. With a great pleasure, I would like to introduce myself to you. This is Hadi. I'm an architect, urban designer, and urban planner. Originally Persian. So I lived in Iran, Turkey, worked in Iran on lots of projects, different range and scales of projects, construction, architectural design, landscape architecture, and I'm moving to California in the middle of pandemic. So I just started in Pacific Grove. So I lived for a year in Pacific Grove. This is the reason I'm in love with this area, Monterey County. So I started my second master's degree at San Jose State University. At the same time, I started working in the City of San Jose, Department of Planning and Transportation. Then moved back, after graduation, I moved back to Monterey County, worked with housing and community development at Monterey County. And now just joined to Guido's great team, planning team, with a great pleasure. I'm glad that I'm here in Guido's team, and I'm looking forward to contributing more and more to our great community with Guido. Thank you so much, Brian.
Welcome.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 10, correspondence. Whew. All right, then we can adjourn. Wait a minute.